All right, so let's get going. Today, I just wanted to take a little bit of time to share kind of my top 10 rules, tricks, strategies for negotiation. It Writing the estimate, having documentation, OE procedures, etc., great pictures, whatever it is really only a small part of what it takes to get compensated to do a repair. But negotiation is a lot more than just getting paid what you want in an estimate. It's how you deal with your employees, it's how you deal with your customers, it's really how you even deal with life, right? So from the moment we wake up every day, we're negotiating from sun up to sundown. Sometimes we're negotiating with others, and sometimes we're negotiating with ourselves. So knowing those rules or being aware of some of the pitfalls and challenges can make not only your business life a little bit better, but life in general a little bit better. Nothing's perfect, but sometimes knowing some things really just kind of helps it through, makes it a little easier. So let's get started. I'm going to jump up here and share this screen, and we're going to go through them. So, what's my top 10 list for negotiations? All right. First one, know your brain. Now, everybody goes, well, that seems a little ominous, Kristen. Know my brain. What does that mean? Well, I don't want you to be a psychologist or turn into a neuroscience, but we are a neuroscientist, but we are going to talk a little bit about some of the finite rules of the brain in neuroscience. It basically controls everything we do and who we are, our personality, everything lives in the brain. Now, the great thing is, two parts. One, the human brain hasn't changed in forever. It's still the same as it was really when we were cavemen. And two, well, we all share the same brain in a way. So understanding human interaction, understanding how the brain works and how it drives our emotions and feelings and thoughts and things can really help us in negotiations across really everything we do. So without having a neuroscience or a psychology class or any of that, I just want to kind of break it down into three parts. Now, the brain's made up of lots of different lobes and functions, and there's all these neurons and flashing back and forth across it. But if we think of it like a company, like an organization, like a business, the brain really has three major departments. Now, the first department that's the frontal lobe. I like to call it the executive suite. That's where all really good business decisions are made. That's what I like to call the 50,000 foot level. So in this particular part of my brain is where my memory lives, my logic, my reason, my ability to do recall and bring ideas together to make good decisions. I make decisions here based on facts, and I think through how they benefit or hurt other parties. This is really, like we said, it's an executive function. If I'm here, the odds of me making a really good decision for my business or for other people's is the best it's going to be. Now, the next department that we have, the amygdala, I like to think of it like my human resources department. So the amygdala, it senses sensory input and provides motivation. So that's where it's telling the body what it should be doing and responding to what it's receiving. My emotions really live here, how I feel about things. Sometimes it's that hurts, ouch. Sometimes it's I really like puppies. But there's a lot that's going on there. Now, I like to think of the amygdala as a human resources department because it really touches all of the departments in my brain because that's kind of the influence that it has. It's a middleman, so to speak. But there's a lot of influence here in this particular part of the brain, specifically when we get into negotiations. Now, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of papers, there's a lot of even videos you can watch with top negotiators and people on the FBI hostage teams or military or police talking about the role the amygdala plays in it. But just know that it's kind of my sensory input, and it's going to tell me how I'm going to react to something. So it may be the elevator that gets me to the executive suite, or it may be the elevator that shoots me straight down to the next department of my brain. So that base stem, I like to think of this as my security department. That's really kind of the first evolution of the brain. So a lot of like scientists and white papers and studies and books refer to it as the lizard brain. But that's where survival lives. That's fear, flight, that's anger, that's our basal human reactions. That's kind of our caveman mentality down there. And we have to have it. That's what's led us to survive. We knew as cavemen to find other people, right? So we started negotiating very early. We were negotiating with our environment to survive it. And then we were negotiating with peers to form tribes and teams in which we could survive the elements and work together for the greater good. That part of us is it's instinctual. It's there when trauma occurs in early life or when trauma occurs at any point. That's the type of the brain that holds it. It responds. It's where all of our reactions are. It's our defensive position. And so in this industry, both sides of this fence will typically enter a negotiation in that department. We are both very defensive. We are both actually really fearful for how negotiations are going to go. Now, I can't make good decisions here, can I? Because I'm going to make reactive decisions meant for survival, not necessarily, or reactive decisions meant for immediate survival, but not actually, or in all probability, decisions that are good in the overall grand scheme, 50,000 foot level, like we like to talk about. So it's very important when I am even thinking about or planning a negotiation, or I'm even in a negotiation, that I want to be cognizant of where I am. So I'm not always going to be in that executive suite. I'm human as well. The other party is human. Where am I? Where are they? And then what might I need to do to move them where I want them? So I want everybody in the executive suite when we're going to negotiate or make a decision, because that's where I'm going to get the best one for them and myself. If they're down here, I got to get them up there. If I'm down here, I've got to get up there. So I just need to be really aware of how the brain works, what the triggers are, how to recognize them, and then understand the influence that those three major departments play on the decisions that I make. Next, we just talked about it just a little bit. You have got to prepare. So preparation is your research, right? It's everything about the car, it's the repair procedures, it's those things. But there's so much more that you have to know. And you got to know your customer. You may have to know some policy if you need to have some of that handy. You may need to know history of the customer with a company. But there's a lot of things that you need to have at your disposal in your knowledge. If I'm going to go to battle, I want to know everything right then. So what do you know? Make a list of what you know. If you are missing a particular piece of information, if you believe something would be handy to have and you're taking stock as you're preparing and realize you don't have it, now's the time to get it. You don't want to realize you don't have something in the middle of a negotiation. If I have to stop it to go find an answer, or if I seem ill prepared and that presents what's going to appear as a weakness, then I may have lost the momentum that I've had in the negotiation. So what do I know? And I'm going to gather all that up. Next, when I start to prepare, what do I want? Each objective at each negotiation engagement is different. I don't just start a negotiation and going, you're at $1,000, I'm at $9,000, we got an $8,000 difference. It's very obvious that my goal is the $8,000, but that's not how I'm going to start every single negotiation. Negotiation is constant. So it's one of those things where, what do I want right now? What do I want? What point do I want to make now? How do I want to move things along? Sometimes it's not a large amount. Maybe my goal or what I want is the whole amount at the same time. Sometimes I don't want any amount. Sometimes the negotiations begin over something else, right? So knowing what I want is critical, and listing that out and being very clear on it. I have so often see collision repairs enter into a negotiation. Make no mistake, every conversation you have is a negotiation, whether you know it or not, because you're laying groundwork or you're tearing down groundwork that you've already done. So I see so many repairers enter into negotiations with no real idea of what they want or what the goal was that day. And it allows things to go awry very quickly if you don't have it. What do I need to show? So if I know what I know and I know what I want, what do I need to convey to get that other person to see it my way or to feel like they're seeing it their way based on the evidence I've provided? What are the obstacles? So what arguments are they going to present, or what natural barriers may be present that I need to make sure that I'm going to overcome? Sometimes that's policy language. Sometimes that's timing. Parts aren't available or whatever. But there will always be obstacles to your goal. And then what are the openings? So for every obstacle, there is always an opportunity. And we need to make sure that we are aware of what those are, that we have anticipated what we believe will be our openings. And so that when or if those openings present themselves in the midst of the negotiation, we are ready to take advantage of them at that moment, and we don't have that classic missed opportunity, which is always a bad idea when that happens. So next, you want to set some standards. So standards can be a wide variety of things. Most people, when they start thinking about setting the standards for negotiation, they think about, you can't yell at me or be disrespectful or cuss or do whatever. And those are some great standards, because definitely if I want to keep somebody out of that base security department of decision making, I need them to feel safe. And for them to do that, that's going to be my voice tone. That's going to be the words that I use. That's going to be how I incorporate them into the discussion. I definitely don't want to attack them. I don't want them to attack me because, one of my temper is one of my weaknesses, and I'm hyper aware of my weakness. So if it goes there on that side, I'm probably very likely to respond the same. And then we have a complete and total breakdown of negotiation. So sometimes setting that standard is not just to protect them. Sometimes that standard may be to protect me. But what I like to tell shops, more importantly for you for standards right now, is to determine when and where you will engage. Now, we're going to talk about some tips and tricks, and we're talking about neuroscience and all these things that seem to be way too much to comprehend. For a lot of repairers, they look at me and go, I'm still just trying to get my hands around scanning and diagnostics and all the safety things that I have to do for vehicles to get them repaired safe. And I agree with you. Those are the most important things for a repairer to be focusing on right now. So a lot of these nuances of negotiation are hard. You can make some of your best improvements and greatest strides in successful negotiations just by setting standards. I mean, if you don't do any of the other tips, tricks, tactics, or whatever, just determine when and where you're going to engage. Now, in the negotiations long class that you can take, that's like 3 days of training, we talk about who should and shouldn't speak at your organization. So not everyone should be answering the phone or talking to customers or doing whatever. But you need to put yourself in a position, a physical position, where you are able to do your most effective negotiating. You need to be able to have all the information available to you, and you need to be able to make your notes as you're talking, and you need to be able to respond immediately when the negotiation closes. So don't take a negotiation call or supplement discussion call when you're out on the floor talking to the technician about something, or you're getting a parts order, or you're trying to get a customer in a rental car, or you're trying to write an estimate. And as a body shop, you got 1,000 things going today. Some of it's going to be customers coming in and out, and people trying to come in and visit you, and salesmen, and and parts deliveries, and your technicians and your painter are in and out of your office 24 times a day. You got a lot going, and you have made a business by multitasking. But when it comes to negotiation, multitasking will hurt you, not help you. So make sure that you have a standard. That may be a time of day. Hey, I know that between 7 a.m. and about 9 a.m., I am hectic trying to get the day organized, have pre-production meetings, whatever that is. I will not take calls during this time that are negotiation based. I know that I shut the shop down at 5. So at 4 o'clock, I start my shutdown routine. I won't take any calls after 4 o'clock unless it's an emergency situation. We all have those. But for me to get the shutdown routine going and to get everything checked out, closed up, put back in the cabinets, on the chargers for the next day, et cetera, whatever I have to do, for me to be out of here at a reasonable time, or to be able to release my employees on time, shutdown starts at 4. So I don't have any negotiations after that. I want to be seated in my office. I want to be able to have my computer up in front of me so that I can be making notes or doing whatever I need to do. Those are just some of the standards. If you put yourself in an optimum position, you will get better results. If you put yourself in a vulnerable position, having conversations while multitasking, you will not have good results. So I can't tell you how many times a day I see on Facebook, whether it's a Instagram or a collision estimating post or a Collision Repair Technicians United post, where someone's complaining about an interaction that they had with the insurance company and things didn't go their way. And ultimately, it was the shop's fault. You put yourself in a position and you didn't close the deal, right? So it slipped away. You thought you had one thing agreed to, and it turned out you didn't. But that's your fault, not theirs. And the reason that happened is because you did not put yourself in the right position to be able to wrap that up at that time. So make sure you set some standards. If you just do that one alone, if nothing else leaves you today from the webinar, just remember to set some standards. All right. Once I know and I'm prepared, I know what I know, and I believe I have anticipated what the obstacles or arguments are going to be, and I have decided what the standards for negotiation are going to be, it's time to practice. Now, when I tell people to practice negotiation, it's not just completing your negotiation matrix. So if you take the longer class, we teach you how to do this negotiation matrix where you lay out all of your thoughts, arguments, tactics, strategies. We just got it all lined up. So that's not what practice is. That's preparation. Filling out that form is preparation. Practice is actually having the negotiation out loud with yourself. So sitting in my office, they'll tell you if they walk past about 3 or 4 times a day, they hear me in here talking to myself. So it's very hard for them to know if I'm on the phone or if I'm actually just having one of my talk to myself moments. But I like to play out the negotiations. I like to anticipate what I think they're going to say. I'm going to say this, they're going to say that. And I really do have this conversation with myself. I may have multiple personalities. I don't know yet. There's still some things to be learned or whatever there. But it's definitely something that you can do on your own. Now, if you are not good at internal dialogue, in other words, in anticipating what you think another person is going to say and what your response should be, then get a practice dummy, right? That could be a coworker, that could be a spouse, that could be a kid. They're out of school right now with nothing else to do. Get your kid to negotiate with you, because if you have teenagers, they're really good at being difficult. So they're the perfect practice dummies for some of this stuff. If you are in a very small shop where you're kind of a one-man or a one-woman band, then find another shop owner that you two can do this together with, and then you can help each other get better. We do that in our 20 groups. That's what we encourage people in our 20 groups to do, is to make connections. Because listening to me, Larry, Jason, Daniel, and Laura is great, but you definitely want to hear from your peers on a lot of situations. So if you need to find a practice dummy that way, and you guys need to do it by Zoom, like what you're watching today, by Skype, by Microsoft Teams, by Facebook, FaceTime, whatever that is, just practice and make sure you're saying it out loud. Saying it in your head isn't enough. What you're doing is you are creating an auditory memory of the negotiation, so that when you are in the moment and things are being said back and forth, what's coming out of your mouth isn't unfamiliar, and what's coming out of their mouth isn't unfamiliar either. I can't bring them in for a pre-negotiation test run. So the only thing that I can do to get you somewhat prepared for what you're going to hear and how to control your emotional reactions to it when you hear it come from the other party is to take you through these practice runs. So they are critical. Make sure that you're having them. Do not skip this step at all. Next. So when you are negotiating, this one's also kind of really hard for shops. So a lot of times we feel like that we're negotiating with someone that's not on our level. And so I have to work with shops on this one all the time. I hear them, I can't believe I'm having to explain what I'm doing to somebody that's never fixed a car, or vice, it goes back and forth. Keep in mind, folks, that side of the table's job is not to fix the car. Their side is to indemnify loss. So they have a job that requires a specialty and a skill. You have a job that requires a specialty and a skill. You guys have got to talk to each other. I'm not going to maybe send you a Christmas card, right, when it's over, but you have just got to be likable, and make sure that no matter how frustrated we get, how mad we get at some of the things that are said to us, because there's some really weird things that get said to us in negotiations, but I've got to just stay likable. So it's a finite rule of the brain. So it's back to the neuroscience. People like to do business with people they like. It sets in motion what's called reciprocity. So if I like you and you like me, I want to do things for you and you want to do things for me. And that desire to pay things back, to help people, is called reciprocity. So if you think about it and go, well, that doesn't make much sense to me. Think of somebody that you really don't like and never have really liked, But because they got you a Christmas gift one year, you immediately ran to Walgreens and was walking up and down the aisles on Christmas Eve trying to find something that you could give them because they gave you something. You ultimately felt the desire, I've got to give you something back, right? You're standing in the office holding it going, oh, I didn't know we were, oh, I got you something too. I just didn't bring it today. You know, we all have those conversations, but it is very, very powerful. The other thing we know is that if you look at Harvard and Yale and Stanford and all the universities across the country that have negotiation degrees, which by the way, you can get a degree in negotiation. When I like someone, I am 31% happy or 31% smarter when I'm happy. So that goes back to that executive level function of the brain. You're feeling safe, you're feeling engaged. So you're up here, you're thinking clearer, you're thinking faster, all is well. You're not defensive and you're not emotional. So be likable, even to people you don't necessarily like in a way when it comes to negotiation. I want the person I'm negotiating against to be 31% smarter because I'm going to be presenting concepts that I need them thinking fast and I need them thinking clearly with logic and reason to grasp if they're going to come along on this journey of decision I want them to be. If I don't have them there, if they're not 31% smarter, then that negotiation is going to deteriorate, not get better, which means even if I just had them in the middle and we were close to the executive suite, the more I push that, the further into the defensive mode they're going to get. Now, you guys have experienced this. If you really close your eyes and think about it, you've had a negotiation, a call with an adjuster or a customer. It started off fairly well, and then it just seemed as the more time went on, the worse and worse and worse and worse it got. Now, some of you will get really good at learning when to hit that eject button so that it doesn't get all the way down here. Some of us, myself included in the early years of my career, I didn't know when to hit eject. And I was actually, as I drove that down further, and in my mind, I thought I was winning. I was like, I've got them. They can't respond. They have no technical background. Boom, 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 boom. And as I'm punching them down, I feel it's a victory. I'm establishing my dominance in the knowledge area. But because I pushed them down in that low department, the negotiation was never successful. They were never happy. Even if we had resolution, they felt they had been taken advantage of and I was unfair. I felt I had been wasting my time having to deal with it. So just remember, be likable. Next, it's one of the hardest ones for me, besides controlling my temper, was to learn to listen. So everyone thinks that they're a good listener. 99% of us aren't. So the thing about listening is that we can sometimes find those openings that we talked about when we were preparing if we're actually listening, or what's called active listening. So too many of us, when we are in a negotiation with anything, our kids, our spouses, our mothers, our cousins, the guy at the grocery store, the car we're trying to buy, or even the supplement we're trying to settle, we're not listening for that person's particular views and emotions. We're listening to find a fallacy in what they're saying. We want to catch them. We want to go, aha, so that we can then bring in the next prepared point that we want to make. So one of the best analogies I saw of this was the double Dutch rope thing. So if you watch people do double Dutch rope, they're standing on the outside of the rope, doing the moving back and forth, trying to get their timing down on the rope, just waiting for a moment to jump in. Unfortunately, that's what most of us do in negotiations. When I play back negotiations that shops or insurers have recorded for coaching, you can tell that the person that says the next thing wasn't even listening to the thing before them because it didn't make any sense, really. It didn't fit in the conversation. They had just been sitting there the whole time waiting to say their next thing. Well, then what you end up happening is you have two people lobbing grenades across a wall and none of them are landing because nobody's listening to each other. So what I want you to start practicing on or practicing doing is listening for questions. So meaning you're listening to what the other person's saying because you're going to ask 3 questions when they're done. So whatever position they have before you move on to your next point or your aha, your Perry Mason, I gotcha moment that you think you have, can I ask 3 questions based on what the person said? If you can ask 3 questions, then you are probably listening. If you can't ask 3 questions, you aren't listening at all. Now, let's not practice this the first time out of the gate in the negotiation with an adverse carrier or whatever. start practicing it with our families, right? We can practice it tonight at the dinner table when we see our kids. We can practice it with our neighbors when we're out walking around this evening, but we can start practicing the 3-question rule. It's just meant to make you start listening so that you see those openings when they happen, but also questioning people on their positions versus giving them your position most of the time can help them change their mind or move to where you want to move them to without them feeling like it was an aggressive or a default decision that they had to make. The next thing that I want you to do about listening is that it is very important that you control what we call the storm of voices. So if 2 people are having a negotiation, there are 4 voices in that conversation. So we both have our actual voice, and then we have those quiet voices in our head. Now, if you're like me with all the multiple personalities, there may be 27 voices in a 2-person conversation. But we definitely always have internal dialogue going on with ourselves. So you've got to learn to not only control that internal dialogue in yourself, but you've got to learn to control it in the other party as well. When I'm speaking, I need them listening to me. So it's not just about me listening to them. I need to know that they're listening so that my points are hitting home and that things can happen. So making sure you control those sterner voices. It means stay on task. Don't jump around. This is one of my least favorite things to do in negotiating. We start talking about, let's say, the bumper. And because that negotiation isn't going the way we want, we jump over and we go, well, yeah, what about this feather prime and block or whatever? So I want to keep you on task. One, if you notice, that's where the conversation starts to go. So that's a key that we have been triggered to our security department of our brain. Pay attention to those. But I want to make sure that we stay on task and that I can prevent him from having, or her from having, those conversations. So if I'm talking about a bumper and they respond to me with feather prime and block, they weren't listening to me at all. They were just going, wait till she shuts up and then I'm going to take her somewhere that she don't have a case because we ain't paying that. So I've got to keep them on task. If I can do that, I can help control that part of the voice. The other thing is I have to go slow. So it's not good for me. For a Southerner, I like to talk really fast. So I have to learn to control my tempo as well as control my tone. And that is also part of listening. So please understand there's your active listening skills. And then there's your responsibility in the negotiation to make sure that the person is listening to you as well. And sometimes that's questions, right? So as I want you listening to be able to respond with 3 questions, I want them to be able to listen. So I'm going to ask them questions. So if I'm talking to you and I think you've spun off in left field, if I can see that eye roll and I know that you're thinking of something else, I may stop my soapbox stance and ask you a question so that I draw you back in. It just, it's kind of like saying treat to your dog. And they're like, what? They don't listen to you any other time of the day until you say treat. And there they are. So if you can see, that's mine. I said treat and there she is. She's like, what? So she hasn't listened to me the whole rest of the day until now, but now she's in the picture. So learn to listen and make this one of your practice sessions. So we can set standards and we can listen, and that's way easier than learning neuroscience, right? All right. The next tip and trick is move the flag. So body shops, man, you really stink at this one. And rightfully so. So it's okay that you stink at this one. It's going to be fine. So when we have a difference, let's say $1,000 photo-based estimate and my $9,000 real inspection, that's a pretty big moat that we're trying to get across, right? It's an $8,000 difference. We are not going to get that $8,000 settled the first time I pick up the phone. And yet so many of us start that as our goal when we make the first phone call. So if I've prepared right, I've already decided that we're going to do this in digestible segments. But regardless, at any point in a conversation, a negotiation, the other party may partially give me what I want, right? We'll give up the easy things first. The things that are, yeah, I can see that's very clear. That was missed, blah, 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 blah. And we'll maybe move the flag from $1,000 to $3,000. It's still not where we want to be, right? I still have a deficit on the repair. But instead of push, 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 I need to know when to plant the flag and end the day. So I have won this particular portion. I want to plant that flag and then I want to move on. Negotiation is constant. It is never singular, and it's always happening, even if we don't think it's happening. So in other words, I'm not talking about an active RO that's in my facility, but negotiation is constant. So it's very easy to say, Tim, I'm so sorry. You've been super helpful today, but I've had a customer that's come in and they're waiting on me. We've made so much progress today. We've agreed on blah, 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 blah. Could you just go ahead and make those changes and update on your end? I will convey to Ms. Smith how helpful and wonderful everything went today and what all you did for us. And then once that's in, I'll get back to you and get this conversation going again. But I really do need to take care of this customer right now. So you've praised them. You've given them a chance to have that motivational reward. You've told them that you're going to celebrate them in front of the customer. And then you've asked them to finalize those changes, right? Because we don't want buyer's remorse. We don't want them to say they're going to pay for something and then 2 hours or 3 hours later they go, well, I don't want to really pay for that. Or a supervisor steps in and goes, you're not paying for that. So we want to make sure that we finalize that. So as soon as I hang up the phone, I'm going to send an email immediately. I am not going to let anything happen, which is why I need to be sitting here with my keyboard so I can send the email. I'm sending it to that adjuster. I'm carbon copying my customer, and I'm saying just what I said on the phone. Tim, thank you today for being so helpful, in which we were able to make some changes and some agreements. I appreciate all that you've done today. You indicated and agreed that you would make those changes immediately and get an updated copy out to Ms. Smith so that she can have it. Ms. Smith, once that's received, I'll take another look at it, and then we'll discuss again what the next steps might be, right? So the customer's always in this as well. But make sure that you move the flag. Don't get so caught up on the end game that you forget to claim the progress that you have. This really does come in handy when we're going to get to the end of an issue and have a deficiency, maybe something that the customer may have to pay out of pocket. We may explore small claims court for a third party, sometimes first party in some states. But when we're definitely going to have a deficit, I really want to make sure that I make that as little as possible. But I want that as a positive experience. I need Tim to want to come back to the table the next day and continue that with me. So claim all your progress as it happens, plant your flag, send your emails, get that updated. Don't lose part because you're trying to go for the whole. We're not saying we're giving up the whole. We're just, Rome wasn't built in a day. You eat the elephant one bite at a time, whatever analogy we want to throw to it. But don't miss an opportunity to plant a flag and gain and claim your success. One of the most powerful psychological principles at play in the human brain is loss avoidance. So we are hardwired to avoid loss, seek reward. That is avoid death, live, right? Don't lose money, make money. All the different ways in which that manifest in our psychology. So I definitely want you to understand that. Don't negate the power of the hunter-gatherer brain and the role that it plays in business today for everybody, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're an employee. But the power of loss. So there actually was a study. It's 2002. It wins a Nobel Peace Prize for this specific psychological phenomenon. However, I got to see this phenomenon in action in the 80s, well before it was a Nobel Prize winning piece of literature or research that was put out. So we feel loss at a much higher rate than we feel gains. And that's how we survive, right? If as humans, we weighed those two things the same, we wouldn't have much motivation. So we might still be sitting in caves, right? So I'm not sure what the right word is for it, but because our brains are wired that way, it is why we're here today. It's why we have the phone. It's why we have men on space. It's everything that's been there. But I think I was about 10 years old, and my dad is having a dialogue/argument with an Allstate adjuster. And it's over a supplement. My dad had turned in a $5 supplement for a nameplate, and that was those old pop rivet nameplates that went on fenders, right? So my dad had turned in the supplement, and the adjuster was very angry to have to be there that day. So $5 supplement seemed like a waste of his time. We weren't respectful. How dare we do it? And I could see I could see the anger, rising up on my dad's neck. So we both share that same piece of genetics, right? When I start to lose my temper, my neck turns red. It's kind of like a thermometer. And so I learned as a kid, I could watch that and knew exactly when my eject moment had to be, right? Like when I had to run before he started throwing tools at me. So my brother never learned it, but I picked him on that one kind of early. But I could see my dad's temper rising, and I'm just over here sanding, going, this isn't going to go good, right? But he ended up grabbing the guy by the ear, and he literally drug the Allstate adjuster out of the shop by his ear, which back then the manager would call you, and you guys would get a laugh out of it. No one went to jail. But we're having this discussion, and I can clearly remember the conversation around the $5. So basically, it was $5 was nothing to the adjuster, was really nothing to Allstate. It was a nuisance. But the loss of $5 to my dad was a loss of lunches for me for a week. So I remember him very clearly pointing to me over there, minding my own business, just blocking a car, going, it's nothing to you, but if I don't have the $5, she can't eat for a week. And that was, that was my dad's emotional response. He was definitely in the security department. It was fear, flight. It was protection of his family. That was where he was basing his decisions and actions and anger from. And then, here was this adjuster that was not aware of what the power of loss was to other people. So in the paper, in the study that won the Nobel Prize, it basically said, if I take $5 from you, you will be more emotionally wired and upset about losing 5 than if I give you 10. And I think we can all relate to that. We've all walked across a parking lot and found a 5, a 10, or a $20 bill, and it doesn't necessarily, we're like, oh, look, I found it. Great. We put it in our pocket. But if somebody came into the shop and took money from us, well, we would all start a war. So understand that loss is greater than victory. Now, the reason this is so important is that in negotiations between repairer and insurer, you are always negotiating loss. They have the coins, you want the coins. And so you must take to get to a satisfactory resolution for you. And we know that for negotiations to be successful, there has to be a win-win. So that's where the tactics and strategies come in, because I need to make them feel that giving up the coins isn't a loss. So if you've ever wondered why an adjuster makes what I would like to call, and I used to call when I was auditing files, a really stupid decision, right? You stepped over dollars to save pennies. You made them use a part that didn't cost me 4 days of rental at $50 a day on a rental car for whatever. And I just wanted to choke people out. Well, the reason those decisions get made, the reason logic isn't there, is because of the power of loss. So that person is focused on the loss of the part versus the gains over here in saving rental and some other things. So when a lot of us go online and go, I can't believe they made this stupid decision, or I can't believe they made me do this. Well, I can, because it's avoiding loss. It's just innate. It's what made us survive. It's our base brain. It's our go-to. It's our safe place. So if I want to be successful, I have got to learn and recognize that and find ways to move the conversations around to make losses become victories. And if I can do that, I can have some successful negotiations. I've got to make my wins appear to be losses so that they can be their gains. Next, so my favorite saying, I finally made like a meme. I made like a diagram for it because I just started handing it out now. I must say this one a couple of times a day through coaching sessions with shops. Do not walk past an open window while trying to find a closed door. And that's where we talk about hearing the alternatives, hearing those openings, hearing what's there. So a lot of times in a negotiation or conversation with anybody, not just in this business, they will give you a better solution, or they will find you, or they will show you a way to the top of the mountain. Sometimes it may be a little bit harder to climb. Sometimes it's a way easier climb, but there is always an opening there. Don't get so focused on what you think you want that you miss out on something better. That comes with listening skills as well, but be hyper aware of pivoting your position. So when an alternative or an opening is presented to you, you can capitalize, pivot, and close. That's how negotiations happen. I, at least probably a couple times a week, someone posts in CRTU about a failed negotiation or something they're upset about, and you'll often see me type in, well, they gave you a better opening. They gave you actually a more profitable way to close that deal, and you missed it. So be aware of alternatives. It's part of my preparation. It's part of my planning stage. I'm thinking about them, what those might look like, what are alternative ways to get what I want and they can get what they want. But make sure when someone gives you that opening, it's something they just say in passing. You're arguing over something and they go, well, I can't pay blah, but I can pay blah. Okay, let's figure that out. So let's stop talking about what we can't do and let's start talking about what we can do. Make sure that you're just listening there and that you can hear those alternatives. Print this saying, tape it to your computer if you're an estimator and a shop owner. Repeat it every day for 30 days and make it a mantra for 30 days if you need to. But there are so many ways to skin the cat, I guess is a good way to look at it. Before I get in trouble with, I like cats. Please just know that. Actually, I don't like cats. I tolerate cats. I love dogs. But there are other ways to your goal. Just make sure that you're open to hearing them. All right. Last tip. Never let them see you angry. People are laughing, going, wait, you do negotiation classes with Larry? I go, yeah, I do. Larry, one day we'll sit down and I'll tell you all the secrets of Larry and court and what it was like to go to court with Larry, against Larry, because that was how we met, was going to court on the other side. But anger never wins at all. Now, I'm not saying that there are not times in a negotiation where you're going to play good cop, bad cop, or where it breaks down completely and it's time to be strict, but anger never wins. When you are angry, where are you? You're in the base brain. When they are angry, where are they? They're in the base brain. Nothing ever good happens there. Now, it's hard as a repairer. Sometimes it's hard as an insurer as well. But it's hard because it's so personal. It is house payments. It is food for your kids. There are so many things. It's safety of our customers. Some of us are so passionate about making sure our customers are protected. We kind of feel it's our duty to defend them. That's one of my weaknesses. If I think something's, compromising the safety of a customer, I'll start a fight on the SEMA floor, right? So it just is what it is. But learning how to control that in negotiations when it comes time to get paid for what you do is critical. You don't win, they don't win, the next customer doesn't win. Never put yourself in a position where your current negotiation for Miss Smith interferes on the next customer who has that same carrier. So my customer next week shouldn't have to pay for the sins of my negotiation this week. I always want to make sure that they have that best foot forward, and controlling temper and anger is one of the best things you can do. Now, you're going to get mad. It's going to happen. I don't have a trick for avoiding anger. I guess you can get a squeeze ball. You can do whatever you think is going to help you. But it just is what it is. And I don't want to control your anger because that's attached to your passion that you have for your customers and your craft and your other things. I don't want to control Larry's temper. And I don't want to control my temper because it is the fuel that drives everything that I do here. But I have to learn how to control it in those situations and negotiations. And sometimes I lose it. And when I do, learning how and when to hit the eject button on the negotiation is good. The negotiations can break down. We can just call it off for the day and come back to it at a later date. If you've ever, I'm probably the only person that watches C-SPAN, but if you watch our government committees, or if you watch NATO negotiations or anything, they don't just sit down in the room that day and hash it all out, right? It's gradual. Sometimes it's weeks of negotiation. It's multiple engagements. It's everyone changes their positions and comes back together. So if I feel like I'm losing it, I just don't do it that day. I'll break out of the negotiation, come up with some reason to hit the eject button. The phone's ringing. My dog needs me. My mom called, whatever it is, to end that negotiation and move on. And then set a time for when you'll come back to the table. Make sure that you always enter a negotiation in the right frame of mind. So if I'm mad, like let's say this happens frequently, I'm online, I read some sort of post on Facebook, or Larry or Mark or somebody texts me a post that's on Facebook, and I get really angry. and then my phone rings, I don't answer it. So I'm not there. I'm not in that mental state. I'm not in the right brain. I'm not ready to talk on the phone. And that's part of that setting the standards. So be hyper aware of your emotional state. Be hyper aware of the triggers that make you angry and do everything you can to avoid them. And then it's still going to happen. And so don't do everything you can not to let them see you lose it. If I think I can get you with temper, I will continue to use that as the push button to win in a negotiation. It's the fallacy of how in so many legal situations we tried to handle Larry. The assumption was he was this hothead, and if I pushed the right buttons, I could make him lose it, and he would yell and scream and cuss, and the jury would hate him, and all of these things that simply just aren't true. So you can't push his buttons in a courtroom, and no matter sometimes how many different law firms I tried to tell that to, they believed the persona that was out in the world versus the reality. And sometimes that was the entire legal strategy, was let's see if we can make Larry mad, and then it didn't work. So, but that's how that is perceived. If you are perceived as a hothead, that you are easy to lose your temper, then I'm going to push that button. I will probably try to push that button with the customer on the phone, because if I can embarrass you in front of the customer when you lose your temper, I will control that customer and everything that happens from that moment forward. So never let them see you angry. All right. Good news. Just to give everybody an update, I used to teach a smaller version of the negotiation class. It was an 8-hour class. I would go around the country and teach it, and we would try to drive home a little bit more of the neuroscience and some of the strategies and tactics that you can use once the negotiation starts. So once I'm in it, here are some things I should do, not do, never do, sometimes do, last chance, victory, or whatever. So what we've decided to do is we are taking that into an online format. We broke that up and then expanded those modules. So this is a class. I love this little binder. I taught this class for years, and that was a lot of writing to put a course together. But it was about alternative dispute resolution, negotiation, litigation management. It was all of the stuff that we used to teach in claims. And so we're breaking all of this out, adding a little bit more meat to the sections. Roughly, this was a 3-day class. I imagine this negotiation, when it's over, will take 3 days to complete, but we're putting it all in an online format. It's in production now, and we anticipate we'll release it sometime in July, so that you can, one, go through the whole series on your own time frame. It's not taking 3 days off from work. It's not even taking now a whole day off from work to come sit in a classroom with me and learn negotiation. But more importantly, it will be broken up in so many different individualized segments. If you are preparing for a negotiation, you will easily be able to go and watch a short 5-6 minute tutorial on the very topic maybe that you want to learn more about at that moment. If you are 360ing a negotiation, meaning you've hung up the phone and you're like, I'm going to grade myself. How did it go? What did I miss? What wasn't there? And then you identify something as a weakness, you'll be able to immediately go back and just focus your attention on that one thing at a time. It takes 30 days to make a habit. We can't take all of the negotiation skills and suddenly you're a master of them. We're going to work on one thing at a time as we go. And we're hoping that this new format really helps make it easier for you to study, prepare, and then better yourself after the ends of those negotiations. So if you've got any questions, definitely reach out to us. It's my favorite topic. I love to talk about it all the time. I think people get tired of hearing me talk about it, but I do love to talk about it all the time. So definitely just let us know. And when this class is ready officially, we'll launch it online and let everybody know where to go get it. So have a fantastic day and weekend. We do have a holiday weekend coming up. So hopefully, even in the midst of all of this COVID, you guys can find some time to get away and do some things fun this weekend and recenter yourself, recharge your batteries, and then come back to the table next week and hopefully have an amazing journey in negotiations. Thanks. Have a great weekend.